anybody else? Question. Brainstorm. Yeah,
I
Marietta.
have a question. I'm frustrated about the Kansas story of John Brown just as much as the Harper's Ferry one. You know, we talk about the people that wanted slavery coming from Missouri, and they have this nice little name. They're the Missouri Ruffians. And it sounds like a football team, you know, and they didn't really do anything. They were just roughing people up. And somebody might have incidentally died. It wasn't that John Brown and his family, who were pacifistic and defending themselves and putting people on notice, don't be bothering us. We're playing rough. But it isn't easily found. You know what I'm talking about, Luke? To me, it's not easily found, and I'm very frustrated that that's the tale, that John Brown is the fanatic and the terrorist, and that the people, the Missouri Ruffians, were, I don't know. It's confusing to me.
Yeah, yes. I mean, this is such an important topic because first of all, from a social political standpoint, it's such a stratified a set of stratified errors, one error built on another. And I think at the basis of it, there is a complete misrepresentation about the nature of white society in general in the 19th century, so that you could have large segments of white people who were anti-slavery racists. And so then you, of course, I mean, you have pro-slavery people, whether they're from the South or from the North, that are explicitly racist. If you read the New York Herald at the time, I mean, the N-word is commonplace in the New York Herald. When you go to the South, it's racist. Then you talk about Western Free State people or Free Soil people who were racist. They didn't want Kansas to have black people in it. Then you have the abolitionists from the East, and particularly our Brown family, who go out there and they're like, we believe in black equality. And, Henry Thompson of North Elba has a conversation with one of the local racists, and the local racist is going on and on about how inferior black people are. And Henry Thompson says, I know black people that are so smart compared to you that would be like you to your dog. And what is important about that is that the result of that conversation, they were going to kill Thompson. They wanted to do so. That's how terroristic these people were. And so my argument is we're letting, frankly, even academia put John Brown in this terrorist box. And what we need to fight about is to say, no, John Brown was not a terrorist. He was a counter-terrorist. The terrorism was implicit in slavery, in genocide, and even in the everyday language and the values of white society, especially the pro-slavery people. And so the man who killed Frederick Brown in August of 1856, John Brown's son, came to Kansas as a free soil man. And he did not want black people in the territory. And he was so disgusted and alienated by the abolitionists that he moved over to the pro-slavery side. So we have to understand that this is really difficult, and it can even become very problematic because even people like Abraham Lincoln, who was by no means, a hateful man, but he himself kind of comes out of that tradition of, well, we want, it's really a white nation, but we don't want to enslave black people. We don't want to steal their labor. But let's face it, whites are superior. So we have to appreciate also how dangerous it was just to have a politic or even a religion of equality. But I refuse to let anyone call John Brown a terrorist. I think we all need to be very clear that John Brown was a counter-terrorist, and that the circumstances in which he did those killings was one of no law and order, no protection from local or territorial or federal constabulary, and that his family and his community were not only hated because they were free state people, but because they were abolitionists and egalitarians. And then the flip side of that is those people that were coming in as as Marietta says, are not ruffians. Ruffian is a nice word for them. They are terrorists. And these people, if they were running around our society today, we would be arming ourselves. And we need, and I think it's wonderful. We need to understand the people that were killed. These were not just pro-slavery people. He would never have killed pro-slavery people. John Brown traded. Remember, he lived in Kansas for this is. I'm writing about this now. I'm trying to get ready to write about this 1856, just by itself. John Brown lived in the territory from October 1855 until the Potawatomi killings in 1856 May. So during those months, he traded. He went to Missouri back and forth. He traded with pro-slavery people. He got along. John Brown really believed in, as much as possible from the Bible, live at peace with all people. That was his philosophy. So for him to do what he did, you have to ask the question, what would cause, and I tried to say this in my biography, the first book I did, what kind of people, what kind of situation must it have been to make these kind of people do what they did? That's where we have to start. And I understand any good person can do something really rotten. But when you look at the pattern of the family, of their values, of the way they conducted themselves, all the way up to the spring of 1856, you have to ask what was going on that would cause these people to go to do something like this. And you won't get this from PBS. You won't get this from the universities. You won't get this from the academics because they're so fixated on making this a conversation about John Brown and terrorism and the politics of violence. And they never talk about the reality of this was a man who did not have a violent inclination. I'm reading a book by Nicole Etchinson now, a book about Kansas politics, and she calls John Brown a gun happy enthusiast. The man was not a gun happy enthusiast. He was a peace loving man. And when he went to Kansas, he wasn't going around looking for a fight. He was working on building and taking care of his family. That is the stuff of what we need to understand about this man. So, but they've done a job on him because they've done a job. And I'll shut up, I promise this, but I start to go and then I'm just like a house on fire. But what they did to John Brown is the literary, cultural, historical version of what they were doing to Black people while they were destroying John Brown's reputation because they were destroying Black people's foundation in Reconstruction. And what we have to understand is that as John Brown goes down symbolically, as a metaphor, as a representative historically, what is being done to Black people in the here and now? And so when we're going to fight for racial justice, we're not really fighting for John Brown's reputation because no one's going to mess that up anyway. People who know. But that's why we're struggling against racial injustice, because as we lift up the truth, John Brown will shine more clearly. So, but I agree with you, Marietta. We need to we don't need to avoid it. We don't need to circumvent Potawatomi. We need to talk about it because most people who had any common sense at all, if they knew the real situation and what was happening in Kansas, they would sympathize with John Brown.